edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, are you, like me, anxious that Plan B and the introduction of vaccine passports are maybe paving the way to a stealth January lockdown? I'll issue a plea to Tory MPs to save our freedoms before it's too late in my digest. And then I'll get the views of my superstar panel tonight. Laura Dodsworth, Benjamin Butterworth and Esther Kraku. Then, in the clash, former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe and Boris Johnson's one-time rival for London Mayor Labour's Ken Livingstone debate whether MPs should rebel against Plan B in that vote. And I want your verdict too. Plus, is there anything that can be done to stop vaccine passports and work-from-home measures decimating businesses? Entrepreneur and director of Gales and Brompton Bicycles, Luke Johnson, stands up for terrified bosses and workers across the nation. That's in Uncancelled. After a bit of a week from hell, it's certainly not the end for Boris Johnson, but is he up for changing to save his premiership? Tory party grandee David Muller is going to present his four-point plan for getting the PM back on track at 10:20. Could the drive for booster jabs spark a new cancer crisis? That's positive Professor Carol Sikora's warning. He'll be here at 9:30. And has COVID exposed Keir Starmer's failings as leader of the opposition? GB News star Neil Oliver thinks so. He's today's outsider. After Nigeria looks to put the UK on the red list out of spite at travel bans for international relations. Plus, why has J.K. Rowling go to war with the SNP over a shocking new trans row? My panel will weigh in on those topics and much more of the big stories of the day throughout the media buzz. And as ever, remember, we bring you the first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages and crown a new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass just before the end of the show. So do stay with us all night. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. The Daily Mirror and the BBC have gone too far in their pathetic bid to bring down the Prime Minister over the Christmas festivities last year at number 10 Downing Street. Sure, you know I was angered last week at the hypocrisy of those in charge making the rules and then breaking them. To me, it shows the rules were not required in the first place. There's absolutely no need for the state to dictate who we celebrate with over the festive period, or at any time, actually. But for the Sunday edition of The Mirror and BBC News to think they had some sort of smoking gun to bring Boris Johnson down with this picture that I'm about to show you is laughable overreach. The bloke, as you can see here, was hosting a Zoom quiz, for God's sake. Exactly what we were all meant to be doing last year. Yet again, today Boris denied he had broken any rules.
Numerous parties have now been recorded or reported about in number 10 during the lockdown last year. And now it emerges that you hosted a Christmas party quiz with groups of people in various rooms in number 10 when such things were banned. Have you asked Simon Case to investigate you?
I can tell you once again that I certainly broke no rules. All that is being looked into.
So look, I'm actually going to focus on what's really important tonight. the mass Tory rebellion over Plan B, and why all Conservative MPs must vote against vaccine passports in the next 24 hours. I'll have a special digest coming up on that. Then my superstar panel is unleashed. Tonight, I'm excited about this. The State of Fear author Laura Dodsworth is here. So too, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth and the social commentator Esther Kraku. But first, she's back with us by popular demand. Polly Middlehurst with the news at 9.
Thank you, Dan. These are your latest news headlines on GB News. The Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of coronavirus in the UK. Earlier, the government announced that around 10 people in England had been hospitalised with the new strain.
Sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalisations, and sadly at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
Boris Johnson speaking earlier on today. Well, earlier on tonight, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, issued his statement to the nation and urged everyone eligible to get their booster jab.
If you haven't had your first or second jab, now is the time to come forward. It matters more than ever. Getting jabbed, wearing masks, and working from home if we can really will help prevent infections.
So the Wales First Minister has announced urgent plans to accelerate the booster programme there. Mark Drakeford says the Welsh Government is now planning offering the booster to all eligible adults by the end of the year. This follows Omicron expecting to become the dominant form of the virus in Wales by next month. He explains how important the third jab is to protect against Omicron.
Now, over the weekend, new evidence emerged about the effectiveness of our vaccines against Omicron. 2 doses of the vaccine is simply not enough to give the level of protection against infection we all need. The booster dose is vital.
Mark Drakeford speaking there. Well, the Health Secretary today said the new Omicron variant now makes up 20% of all COVID cases in England. Taking urgent questions in the Commons, Sajid Javid also warned 44% of cases in London are now the new variant. He also told MPs the UK Health Security Agency estimates the current number of daily infections are around 200,000, and there are now over 4,700 confirmed cases of Omicron in the UK. Away from COVID, a US citizen charged with causing Harry Dunn's death by dangerous driving will face a UK court early next year. Anne Sakoulas, the wife of US diplomat Jonathan Sakoulas, is accused of killing the teenager in a road crash outside the US military base RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire in August 2 years ago. The Crown Prosecution Service says the case will be heard at Westminster Magistrates Court in January. That's all from me. Now back to Dan Wootton and Tonight.
Boris Johnson ratcheting the fear factor over Omicron to panic stations, we're all going to die on a Sunday night, less than 2 weeks before Christmas, has actually made me feel a little bit ill.
No one should be in any doubt. There is a tidal wave of Omicron coming, and I'm afraid it is now clear that 2 doses of vaccine are simply not enough. Do not make the mistake of thinking Omicron can't hurt you, can't make you and your loved ones seriously ill. The wave of Omicron through a population that was not boosted would risk a level of hospitalisation that could overwhelm our NHS and lead, sadly, to very many deaths.
That deep anxiety I can't shake is because it's clear to me now that my prediction the past few months that you know I've been making on this show is that we are on a one-way path to a January lockdown, and it's eventuating by stealth. While the PM talks of a terrifying tidal wave of Omicron, all I can think about is a far bigger wave of mental health problems, at-home deaths, damaged education opportunities and missed cancer diagnoses as the NHS is once again effectively rebranded the National COVID Service. How is it that we seem to have learnt nothing since March 2020? In the march towards further curbs on our lives, what seems to be completely missing is the evidence that Omicron is a big killer. In fact, the South African experts beg us to calm down because all of the early real-world data actually suggests this variant is far milder.
Yes, you can have 1 million cases. You can have even more than that because it's highly contagious. But the severity of the disease is not Delta. It is mild disease. And yes, you will get people that's going to be sick, but it will be the minority. Our ICUs at this stage is not full.
Yet the hysteria continues at pace. So I feel the time has come for Boris to pick a path. Sure, most of us will agree to get triple jabbed en masse if we know it will guarantee our freedoms forevermore. Yet it feels like the sage merchants and cabinet COVID hysterics like Michael Gove will not rest until business is decimated and we're once again locked in our homes, with the government controlling who we can see and what we can do when. I'm convinced the country is no longer terrified, but we're furious and exhausted about this COVID merry-go-round becoming a never-ending horror show. That's why tomorrow's vote is the most significant of the COVID crisis so far. Every single Conservative MP with a conscience has a chance to send the clearest message to the Prime Minister and those hysterics like Gove that we must learn to live with COVID-19 once and for all. We say no to mask mandates. We say no to curbs on our freedoms and liberty-destroying vaccine passports that mark the start of a biosecurity state, especially when there is virtually no evidence they are effective in any way. Labour and the toothless, pathetic leader of no opposition, Keir Starmer, will nod through the proposals without any scrutiny. So it's up to the Tories to put their ambitions to one side and do what they know is the right thing. Ahead of tomorrow's key Commons showdown, I say to every single Tory MP this: vote for liberty, vote for freedom, vote in favour of the evidence, vote to stop a two-tier society, vote to halt the march of the sage maniacs taking control of our lives again, vote for the right of the individual to decide what they wear, who they meet and where they go. Vote for what you know is right. So tomorrow, vote against Plan B. To hell with the consequences for your personal career. Stand up for those long-held beliefs of your party, especially the freedom of the individual. Tory MPs must finally send a message to Boris Johnson that he can only remain in post if he commits to living with the virus now vaccines are available, as he has promised us all year. To respond now, let me bring in my superstar panel. Tonight, the State of Fear author Laura Dodsworth, senior reporter at the I newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. Esther, it looks like there's going to be the biggest rebellion of this Parliament tomorrow night. Will it be enough?
I don't think it will. I hope it will, but I don't think it will. And I think what you said there was perfect. Vote with the evidence in mind. There is no evidence. Shouldn't Omicron be a good thing? There is evidence that is a lot milder than the Delta variant, which has suddenly disappeared from media, right? Isn't it a good thing that it's a milder form of the virus? That means it's mutating and it's becoming less potent, even if it spreads faster and more easily. But what bothers me is the fact that the government generally thinks we're stupid. They treat the public like we're utter morons, right? There's no evidence that Omicron is more deadly. There's no one who's even died from it, right? There is no evidence that...
Well, Boris Johnson says one person in the UK has died with it.
Not of it,
yeah,
right?
Good point.
So there's no evidence that
point.
it's any deadlier. There's no evidence that the NHS is going to be overwhelmed. There is a lot of evidence to say that people that actually needed vital care for illnesses like cancer have actually not received treatment or not even been to a screening, right? You're putting all of our lives at risk for something that there's no evidence of, which means you just think we're fools.
Well, Laura, that's actually the perfect point to come to you, and it's a perfect night to have you on the panel because, of course, you are the expert about all of these behavioural insights team that the government pays hundreds of thousands of pounds to, the nudge unit. Are they taking us for fools? Do they think we're morons, Laura? Because today, Boris Johnson actually said we should put to one side whether Omicron is severe or not. Why on earth would we put that to one side? Surely that should be at the heart of all of the decision-making.
I found last night's address to the nation quite bewildering. I liked your introduction, very rousing. I want to rally round your flag. It was very good. How strange that such a disproportionate and extreme measure would be introduced when there is no evidence. Back in the summer, the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee found the government couldn't put forward a good scientific reason for vaccine passports. The Scottish Government has just released a report which also found no evidence.
70 pages.
Yeah, no evidence.
70 pages, no evidence. And Sturgeon, who's like almost like a little COVID dictator, isn't she, up there in Scotland? Even she couldn't extend the vaccine passport scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. And in countries which have introduced them, not only have they, you don't see any discernible positive impact, cases have skyrocketed. Denmark just reintroduced them recently and their cases have gone up.
Or Germany,
France,
Italy, France. I mean, the cases skyrocketed.
We don't have any real-world evidence for them, and yet they're a very disproportionate measure. We also know from a few different studies that if what you're trying to do is create a net shift upwards in vaccine uptake, you will also create a very stubborn, meaningful minority of people who don't want to be vaccinated because they'll feel coerced.
I actually want to stop using the word coercion, Benjamin Butterworth, and I want to start using the word blackmail. That's what vaccine passports are about. It's about blackmailing the vaccine hesitant to get jabbed in order to have fun, in order to live a life. Surely even you must accept that this is not the sort of society that you want to live in.
Well, first of all, they're not vaccine passports, they're COVID passports. Because if you haven't had the double jabs, if you haven't had 1 or 2 or 3, then you can just get a lateral flow test, and if it's negative, you can do whatever you wish.
It's a triple jab,
you can do whatever you wish to do, so it is not accurate to call it a vaccine passport. Secondly, Laura referred to France. Well, France saw a sharp uptake in the take of the vaccine. Take, for example, their their health service, where they introduced it mandatory, as we have recently for our NHS. They went from about 2/3 vaccinated to 99% vaccinated.
So can I just clarify, Benjamin?
Can I just clarify, Benjamin? Safe.
Can I just clarify, Benjamin? So you're happy with blackmail if it works?
It's not blackmail, Dan. It's people taking responsibility for themselves and people around them. We're not in a normal situation. We're in an emergency. We're in an emergency, yes. We're in a pandemic.
Feel like we are. Do you think we're in an emergency?
No,
well, I think the people filling up the hospital beds and the 160,000 people who have died in the last 18 months would feel like it was a pretty urgent
Off COVID
thing.
is very questionable.
Dan just asked me to say something. I want to pick up on one of your points because it's a really good point that you mentioned that COVID passes include a lateral flow test. I think that's probably a concession to the very severe rebellion the government have on their hands. Let's look at Italy. Now, when Italy introduced the Green Pass, it also had a lateral flow test. You could either show proof of recovery, have a vaccine passport or a lateral flow test. That's removed.
Yeah.
There is no lateral flow test.
It's a creep, isn't it?
Yeah. It is a creep.
Because Laura, I also don't believe, by the way, this is going to stay at mass events. Because very soon this will be, if you want to go to the pub, if you want to order
no jab,
a pint,
no job.
Exactly, no jab, no job. If you want to order your McDonald's, because that's what it's like if you go to a city like Amsterdam now, and that's not British.
You know what? You know what's funny? It's really funny that people that are incredibly naive, like Benjamin, which you are, you're incredibly naive. You think this is going to be the end of it.
I mean,
you can have your freedom
you don't know
back
what you're talking about because you didn't even know anyone had died, did you?
You're
not informed.
Guess what? In the last 48 hours, people with two jabs are now technically not fully vaccinated. Even though
that's not
6
correct.
months,
That kicks in
exactly
next
what
year.
Came out of the mouth
Again,
of
Esther,
Sajid
you don't know what you're talking about. That kicks in next year.
That is exactly what came out of the mouth of Sajid Javid. Even though 6 months ago they were saying your 2 doses,
it's not what came out of his mouth,
you'll be fully vaccinated. But
he said once everyone's got the. Let me answer you.
Hold on. This is where
once everyone's got the 3rd dose, then that comes in.
Do you really think this will stop there? Because you're so naive that you're happy to throw away your freedoms, which you can do willingly, but don't think you can throw away my freedoms, because this is enough.
Esther,
I've had enough.
Esther, you sit there, you don't you argue for people who refuse the vaccine, you refuse the lockdown,
yeah, it's called
you refuse
individual
masks.
rights.
You bury your head in the sand.
It's called individual
You are a
rights.
COVID denier. You deny the reality we're in. Your
you
answers,
can give up your rights. I will not do that.
Esther,
you
your
can
answers
stay in
would
your house
see
and lock
people.
the door, and if COVID comes knocking, you can go into your bathroom and
Esther,
hide.
your answers would see people out there dying for no reason.
No,
it
people
could
should take
include your loved
responsibility for
ones.
themselves.
And the truth is that wearing a mask or getting the vaccine is not difficult.
Ask why you're so scared of Omicron?
I'm not. I wouldn't use the word scared.
What I think we're in an emergency.
What I would say is that the answer is clear to keep each other safe.
OK, so can I just clarify? You're not personally scared. You're still going out nightclubbing and living a very social life, but you feel like the country is in a national emergency.
It's in a threat of an emergency because this Omicron variant is doubling the number of cases every 2 to 3 days. That's much faster than the last one. And we know that it's not as good with the 2 doses. And so what do you have there?
Died,
what do you have there? Well, it first came here 2 to 3 weeks ago and we had our first death today.
With COVID, not of COVID.
You don't know. None of us.
I read the news. It said with COVID.
Yes,
was it of COVID?
And Boris Johnson said with COVID.
Again,
Thank you,
Esther,
the Prime Minister. You know,
again, Esther, you don't know what you're talking about because every COVID death is referred to as with COVID, not
so that's
of
inaccurate.
COVID.
So you've just admitted that it's
all
inaccurate.
160,000 are with
If you got
COVID.
hit by a bus and you had COVID, did you die from COVID?
Well, look, I mean, you don't know anything else that happens to that
answer
person.
that question. If you got hit by a bus and you died and you had COVID in your system, did you die of COVID?
No, because you wouldn't be tested after you died. So that's just
really?
nonsense. Look,
do you know how an autopsy works?
No, but Benjamin, to be fair to Esther, if you had tested positive within the past 28 days, you would be put down. It's not Balderdash, Benjamin. It's the
160,000
fact
dead
you would
weren't
be
hit
put
by
down
buses, Dan.
as a COVID death.
They wish they would have if they had to listen to
They weren't hit by buses. And you know what? The truth is that you talk about people with cancer maybe not getting the treatment they want. Now, they should still definitely go to the GP if anybody has concerns about that and the government
Can
would
they
say
see the GP?
But I tell you what, if our hospitals...
They can't see the GP. How many GPs are refusing to see people?
They can't see the GP.
Well, they've been told it's going
and
to be
GPs are refusing to see patients.
If
so
our
what's your response
hospitals
there?
are overwhelmed with people who have this Omicron variant in the next few months, well, who looks after the people with cancer then? That's what you have to answer.
Right.
Benjamin Butterworth, Laura Dodsworth, final word to you, Laura.
Oh my God, the final word.
Yeah.
I've had
Well,
to wait
you're
so
here all
long
night,
to get
but
any
final word
words
for
in.
now.
I do want to come back to the point about mission creep. We've seen mission creep in Italy where the lateral flow test was removed, plus the use of the passport has been expanded to lots of other venues. The government hasn't set a finish line for COVID passports.
Not even close.
There's
this
no
never
evidence.
ends until
There's no
we
finish
say
line.
that it ends, in my opinion. Laura Dodsworth, Benjamin Butterworth, Esther Kraku. They're here all night. It's going to be a feisty one. Still to come, though, should the booster programme really be prioritised over primary care, given the potentially tragic consequences? Positive Professor Carol Sikora hits out at Sajid Javid's priorities at 9:30. But up next, should MPs rebel against Plan B in tomorrow's vote? Political titans Anne Widdecombe and Boris Johnson's predecessor as London Mayor Ken Livingstone speak out in the clash. Want to know your thoughts too? At GBNews if you want to vote in our Twitter poll, or you can email me to dan@gbnews.uk is the address. Back soon.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. A bit of a three-way split with the weather tomorrow. Most places going to be dry and bright, but there will be some wet and windy weather in the northwest and the south at times likely to be a bit dull and dank. This wiggling, waving weather front's been bringing quite a wet day across parts of northwest England and Wales. It is slowly slipping southwards, so outbreaks of rain trickling into the Midlands and South Wales overnight and lasting most of the night here. Clearer skies for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and eastern Scotland, but then things turn wet and windy once more in the far northwest. Well, we have the clearing skies. Temperatures, certainly rural areas, could drop down close to freezing, but we're a long way from that in the south. A very mild night here, but it will be quite a dank, drizzly, misty morning across much of the south, the Midlands and parts of South Wales. Rain on and off here. That should tend to fizzle out, so most places becoming dry. But a brighter day for northwest England compared to today in southern Scotland, Northern Ireland too. But there will be drizzly rain across western Scotland and very wet and windy across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Quite mild here and, again, pretty mild across the south. during the evening. We'll start to see that rain pepping up and pushing south across the Highlands, down towards the central belt, and some rain heading into Northern Ireland. So again, further south, most places dry, but it could again turn quite misty and murky, with maybe the odd light shower across the south on Wednesday. Certainly rain at times for northwest England, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a brighter day in the far north, the winds easing down, and we should see some sunny spells too for parts of the North Midlands and eastern England on Wednesday. Again, pretty mild, double digits for the majority. Now, it's going to stay largely dry beyond Wednesday, Thursday and into the weekend. Not much rain around at all, but often it will be fairly cloudy with light winds and increasing chance of seeing some thick fog patches too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Neil Oliver, David Maller and Luke Johnson all on the way, but time now for the clash. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister is set to face his biggest rebellion yet over Plan B restrictions, specifically plans to bring in COVID passports, with the list of Tory MPs threatening to vote against them reported to be at around 78 and growing, by the way. Former Brexit Minister Steve Baker is leading the charge.
Yes, I will vote against. I think what we're doing now is creating a miserable dystopia into which we're going forward. And that's why today I'm announcing that I'll be relaunching Conservative Way Forward. We need to create a movement which actually says the Conservative Party needs to be what people traditionally have recognised as conservative. That is in favour of freedom and personal responsibility.
Well, you know my thoughts on Plan BS, as I call it, but how do some of the most formidable figures from across the political spectrum feel about this potential Tory revolt? In a moment, I'll bring in former Conservative Minister turned Reform UK politician Anne Widdecombe, who'll be going head-to-head with Boris Johnson's predecessor as London Mayor, and a Labour Party veteran, Ken Livingstone. But as ever, I want to give a voice to you. Should MPs vote for Plan B? You can vote now in our poll on the GB News page on Twitter. Drop me your emails too, dan@gbnews.uk. And Widdecombe, I'm going to come to you first. We're talking about potentially 80 Tory MPs now voting against Plan B, saying no to vaccine passports. This is a significant rebellion. Do you feel like they're doing the right thing?
Yes, it is. Can I just throw in as an aside, I am not a member of the Reform Party. That is a misunderstanding.
Sorry, no, you were a Brexit Party MEP, of course, and are now Reform. So I think that's where the confusion came from. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear. But let me answer your question. I think, of course, MPs should vote against this for two reasons. You've got to ask yourself why on earth there is panic now over a variant that is mild. And there's panic for two reasons. The first is, well, just in case. Well, if you're going to say, just in case, we need to take these extreme measures, then you're going to be crashing the economy at regular intervals, because every time this mutates, and it will mutate, because that's the nature of a virus, we're going to have a just in case scenario. We actually know that this is mild at the moment. And, you know, the idea that there's been one death with COVID, and we don't know the other details of that death, is not cause for panic. The second thing that's going on, and I think is the much more pressing motivation, is frankly backside covering. You know, Boris was criticised heavily for not acting fast enough when COVID first struck, and so now he tries to get ahead of the game every time. But we cannot go on crashing the economy, wrecking education, creating huge queues for cancer treatment, neglecting people in favour of trying to prevent COVID. We can't go on doing that. Now, you know, I speak as somebody who lost a very close friend to COVID, and it was COVID, but I also lost the son of a relative to suicide because he couldn't take the lockdowns. We need to be serious about this, but you've got to get things in proportion, and my view is tomorrow's proposals are disproportionate, and Tory MPs must vote against.
Ken Livingstone, why do you think Labour MPs are doing the right thing by backing the government here? Because if Labour were to oppose these measures, they probably wouldn't go through.
Well, it's not often I agree with Boris Johnson, but literally you've got to do this. I mean, if you look back, this is the worst disease crisis we've had for 100 years, since the Spanish flu, which killed at least 50 million people around the world. This is worse than the AIDS crisis 40 years ago. And the tragedy is, we were about the last country in Europe to go into a lockdown, and we had the worst death toll, much worse than France or Germany. Our Prime Minister was so slow to deal with this. I mean, the first three ministerial meetings to discuss responding to this crisis, he didn't bother to attend them. And that is fairly typical of Boris. He's the most incompetent Prime Minister I have seen in my lifetime.
We don't have anywhere near the worst death toll now, by the way, when you look at per million of population. I think we're something like number 23. But Anne, do you want to pick up on that?
Yes, I would like to pick up on that, because I think what you've got to ask is, as I said at the beginning, you know, if when you have no clear evidence that something is going to be dangerous and result in a lot of hospitalizations, or worse still, a lot of fatalities, then if you are going to say, never mind the evidence, just in case, let's do this, which is effectively what Ken is now saying. I mean, I'm not interested in rehearsing the past. I want to look at the present. If you're going to say, let's do this on a just-in-case basis, you're going to have to do that every time there's a mutation. And the economy won't stand it, and people's mental health won't stand it. And it is just time now that we did what we probably should have done earlier. We have to learn to live with it. That means not being rash, but exercising our own judgment every single time. And you know, all the row about the party in Downing Street, They exercised judgment. They said, well, look, we've all been working together for ages now. And what difference does it make if we've got a glass in our hand instead of a file in our hands? But, of course, they wouldn't allow the population to make that sort of mature and careful judgment. In other words, they were the grown-ups and we were the kids, or they were the prefects and we were the third form. And that is really what people are angry about, but we should be able to exercise judgment.
Yeah, I don't give a damn that they had a party, actually. I give a damn that they stopped us having parties and they stopped us making sensible decisions. Ken Livingstone, what do you say to business owners who simply will not survive if there are these continued work-from-home measures and continued effective lockdowns by stealth?
I think we should have gone into the lockdown earlier. It should have been much tighter rules, and we would have saved thousands of lives. And the real tragedy of this now is we may be lucky. It may be the virus, doesn't mutate into something more dangerous, but it could mutate into something that starts to kill hundreds of thousands of people. And that's what this virus is mutating.
But Ken, there's no evidence of that. That's scaremongering, propagating that, because at the moment the evidence from South Africa is actually that it's a far milder version of COVID. It could actually be a really positive thing.
That's absolutely right. What's happening in South Africa is good. But this virus mutates all the time. And next month or next year, it could go into something much more dangerous. And that's what we've got to prepare for.
Ken, would you keep the country in a perpetual cycle of lockdowns?
Absolutely. Literally, I went and got my first jab, back in January. And I got my booster dose about 2 months ago. I was right at the front of this. Because when I left school, I spent 8 years working in a cancer unit attached to the Royal Marsden Hospital. So all my thinking was defined by being in the NHS. I know the risk of this virus. If we're lucky, it will not be too bad.
So we should be locked down now, Ken?
Absolutely. We should have been in lockdown months before we did.
And then how long do we stay in lockdown, Ken?
Until we get control of the virus. Because, yes,
but the Spanish flu that you speak about still kills thousands of people a year.
But it's right to say this is damaging for the economy. Of course it is. But you could have hundreds of thousands of people dying. The numbers have died already. The numbers of people you see being interviewed.
And there's no evidence to suggest we're going to have hundreds of thousands of people dying from COVID. I would argue, Anne, that if we take the Ken Livingstone approach of the perpetual lockdowns, we'll have hundreds of thousands of people dying as a result of the poverty caused by lockdowns.
No one needs to die because of poverty. The government needs to provide support.
Well, Ken wants that, Anne.
Yeah, I'm just addressing Ken straightforwardly now. A perpetual lockdown, Ken. What is going to happen to the economy? What is going to happen to people's mental health? What is going to happen to the cancer queues? What is going to happen to kids' education in a perpetual lockdown? Thank God Boris hasn't proposed that.
Well, people's mental health is going to be a lot worse when one of their family members dies because of this virus. It's devastating. And the real danger is it can get dramatically worse. We don't know. This is the situation. These viruses mutate. And as I said, we could have a sudden real worse version.
I'm one of those people who had a relative die of COVID-19 in a care home. My great aunt Celia, a woman who I loved very much. But let me also tell you, there is no way that Celia, who was in her late 80s, would have wanted my life to stop perpetually to save her, given that she was already suffering from very bad dementia. And I think we've got to get real. I think a perpetual series of lockdowns, which you're proposing today, would destroy this country.
It won't destroy this country. It can save the lives of millions.
Final word to you, Anne.
You're supposed to be the workers' friend. Yeah, you're supposed to be the workers' friend. What's going to happen to all the workers in a perpetual lockdown? Where are they going to end up? How are they going to manage to live? Whatever are you offering people?
I don't want to have to go to any of their funerals.
OK. Well, look,
you may have to go to their funerals anyway because there are things other than COVID.
And people, unfortunately do die. But look, it's a fascinating debate that's going up and down all over the country. Two political heavyweights with me. Thank you to the Conservative Minister turned Brexit Party MEP Anne Widdecombe and Boris Johnson's predecessor as London Mayor and Labour Party veteran Ken Livingstone. Thank you both. So who do you agree with? Jonathan on Twitter says, let us have a referendum on Plan B as we no longer trust that MPs represent us. Yes, please. I'd like a referendum on it, absolutely, and I think it would get voted down. Jason on Twitter, voting doesn't matter. It's all theatre to make people in the UK believe there is a real democracy when it's all been sorted out and agreed with. Stop. There is no need for it. Don't know what you're implying, Jason, but OK. Eve via email says, I have no faith in those who will vote tomorrow. They have allowed Boris to have emergency measures for almost 2 years. When worrying about viruses becomes an obsession, we are all heading towards oblivion. And your verdict is now in. 86% of you say MPs should not vote for Plan B tomorrow, while 14% of you say they should. We'll obviously bring you all of the reaction to the vote on GB News Live tomorrow night. But coming up, after a week from Hal, it's certainly not the end for Boris Johnson, but is he up for changing to save his premiership? Tory party grandee David Mellor has a plan for the PM. Don't miss that at 10:20. But after the break, why are we worried more about a so-called tsunami of Omicron than a looming cancer crisis? Positive Professor Carol Sikora on the danger of being blinkered by boosters straight after the break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
When Boris Johnson gave his chilling address to the nation on Sunday, trumpeting the importance of the booster programme to defeat a scariant that has claimed a single life in the UK, he also revealed that non-urgent medical appointments are going to be postponed.
As we focus on boosters and make this new target achievable, it will mean some other appointments will need to be postponed until the new year. But if we don't do this now, the wave of Omicron could be so big that cancellations and disruptions, like the loss of cancer appointments, would be even greater next year.
Not so sure about that. Then today, Health Secretary Sajid Javid admitted that primary care is the difficult trade-off for accelerating the booster programme.
We are redeploying NHS staff away from non-urgent services. This means that for the next 2 weeks, all primary care services will focus on urgent clinical needs and vaccines, and some urgent appointments and elective surgeries may be postponed until the new year.
OK, so we're being told to run scared from a tsunami of Omicron. But I say, what about the incoming tsunami of people suffering from cancer or other serious health conditions as a result of missed operations and unchecked medical conditions? Positive Professor Carol Sikora joins me now to warn of the healthcare crisis he believes could be just around the corner. Carol, I thought we'd learned some lessons from the first lockdown of March 2020. But I'm becoming worried that this focus on the booster program and telling people that means they're not going to be able to see their GP and that they might have operations delayed means that probably we haven't.
I don't really understand it, Dan. The booster program's great. It's a logistics exercise. That's all it is. It doesn't need lots of doctors. Doctors don't do the injections, after all. You need a system. Sure, you need a doctor standing by in case anyone faints or has a funny turn when they have the injection. But it's not a big deal. And, nurses, technical staff, blood takers, all these people do injections. There's no reason why we need to stop the whole diagnostic process. And that's so vital, not just for cancer, but for heart disease and a variety of other things. You don't know someone's got cancer until you've made the diagnosis. So if we stop, then more people will suffer with late-stage diagnoses in the end when they get there.
Well, that's the thing, Carol. It just feels like we were starting to catch up from all of those missed appointments and diagnoses from 2020. And this is going to put even more pressure on.
I think the problem is we don't know the facts, and doctors don't know the facts. We're fed this constant PR from government, from the BBC, that none of us really believe. I mean, for example, Omicron's growing, there's no doubt, but it does seem to be relatively harmless in South Africa. Very few hospitalizations. Those that do go to hospital don't go on ventilators. They go out of hospital in a much shorter period of time. And yet we're fed the fact that someone died yesterday with Omicron. We have no details. Did they die from the virus? Did they die of something else and were positive? All these are questions. We're not given the answer. Sure, we want people to get booster shots, and we've got to have the logistics to do that. But it's a bit rich not telling medical staff what's really going on. And so everyone's very sceptical of what's happening.
Well, indeed. And I think the message to the population, Carol, folk like me, is actually, unless it's really serious, unless you're really worried, don't bother your poor GP because they're probably going to be boosting. And to me, that's where we end up with the missed cancer diagnoses, which means we're right back at square one.
Exactly. Protect the NHS, if you remember that slogan from last year. It's almost the same again. It's a culture of fear. They tell you that someone has died of Omicron. For goodness sake, isn't that meant to scare you? It does scare people. It scares them to go and get the booster. That's why you can see now the queues of people wanting to get a booster shot. Good idea, but it's a scary message. It also means someone that's got a weight loss, abdominal pain, not sure what to do, just puts it off for another month. And that month could be the difference between life and death in a year's time.
Carol Sikora, brilliant analysis as ever. Thank you so much. We'll speak again as this Omicron crisis develops. But coming up, the vultures are circling Boris after a week of dramatic headlines. What moves does he have to make to hang on as PM for another few years? Tory grandee David Mellor has a plan, and he'll be here to outline it in the next hour. But in just a moment, has COVID exposed Keir Starmer's failings as the leader of no opposition? GBNews star Neil Oliver thinks so. He'll go to town on not-so-special K in The Outsider in just a moment.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. A bit of a three-way split with the weather tomorrow. Most places going to be dry and bright, but there will be some wet and windy weather in the northwest, and the South at times likely to be a bit dull and dank. This wiggling, waving weather front's been bringing quite a wet day across parts of northwest England and Wales. It is slowly slipping southwards, so outbreaks of rain trickling into the Midlands and South Wales overnight and lasting most of the night here. Clearer skies for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and eastern Scotland, but then things turn wet and windy once more in the far northwest. Where we have the clearing skies, temperatures certainly rural areas could drop down close to freezing, but we're a long way from that in the south. A very mild night here, but it will be quite a dank, drizzly, misty morning across much of the south, the Midlands and parts of South Wales. Rain on and off here. That should tend to fizzle out, so most places becoming dry. But a brighter day for northwest England compared to today in southern Scotland, Northern Ireland too. But there will be drizzly rain across western Scotland and very wet and windy across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Quite mild here and again pretty mild across the south. During the evening, we'll start to see that rain pepping up and pushing south across the Highlands down towards the central belt and some rain heading into Northern Ireland. So again, further south, most places dry, but it could again turn quite misty and murky with maybe the odd light shower across the south on Wednesday. Certainly rain at times for northwest England, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a brighter day in the far north, the winds easing down, and we should see some sunny spells too for parts of the North Midlands and eastern England on Wednesday. Again, pretty mild, double digits for the majority. Now, it's going to stay largely dry beyond Wednesday, Thursday and into the weekend. Not much rain around at all, but often it will be fairly cloudy with light winds and increasing chance of seeing some thick fog patches too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
The great Neil Oliver is tonight's outsider. And breaking tonight, the leader of no opposition, as I like to call him, Keir Starmer, has given an address to the nation that no one asked for and no one cares about.
We'll always support measures designed to protect public health. That includes the measures in Plan B. We are a patriotic party, and it's our patriotic duty to vote for these measures to ensure that they go through. In doing so, we are supporting the NHS and supporting our country. But rest assured, I will still hold the government to account in the coming weeks. That is also in the national interest.
You haven't held them to account for the past 20 months, mate. Look, there were lots of platitudes there from Starmer, but not one alternative to the government's plans. What would Labour do differently? Are we really in an emergency? What evidence are you using to back vaccine passports tomorrow? None of those questions answered. So how can our Westminster system operate when we effectively have a COVID coalition of the Tories and Labour with no functioning opposition? GBNews star Neil Oliver has consistently pointed out how COVID has led to a crisis in leadership, and he joins me now to react to Starmer's address. Neil, you say Starmer's speech was a 10-minute-long suicide note on behalf of the Labour Party. Explain.
They are, as the Tories are, as the Conservatives are, they are devoid of ideas. They are a void, or the Conservatives are a void into which Labour are just being pulled as though into a black hole. These parties are relics. They are shadows and hollow echoes of what either of them used to be. The Conservatives are not Conservatives. The Labour Party no longer represent the working class. They don't represent Britain. What I heard Keir Starmer say tonight, as I described it in something in social media, I genuinely believe that that's a suicide note. If we needed to have underlined that the opposition is nothing of the kind, is just an emptiness, a tissue paper, an insubstantial, inconsequential nothingness. If that is all that stands up and, in inverted commas, holds the feet of the Conservative government to the fire, then it's all over. And it is undoubtedly, and for generations to come, it is all over for the Labour Party. The Labour Party no longer exists.
Fascinating analysis, and I think a lot of people will agree with that. Neil, do we need to find some hope, though, in the fact that there is an opposition emerging, and it's emerging from within the Tory party? 80, we're told, 80 MPs will rebel tomorrow against vaccine passports. I salute every single one of those MPs, although we will watch the vote tomorrow night because I imagine there'll be a lot of wrangling over the next 24 hours. Do you take any hope in the fact that there is a bit of opposition finally emerging from within the Tories?
Yes, I do. It is an irony. I hadn't actually thought of it in that way, that the credible opposition is emerging from within the government.
Yeah,
and maybe that is a good thing. Maybe that shows that there are still people thinking. 80 people allegedly or apparently planning to vote against it. Let's see what actually happens. What people say and what people do. Very different things potentially, but let's see what actually happens. There are people who are absolutely worth listening to. Baker, David Davis, absolutely. I've had him on my show. I know that you've spoken to him too. He is and he was David great Davis, with Farage earlier. Yeah, he's just a voice of reason. It's like listening to the voice of the ancestors almost. It's like listening to some wisdom from the past. And every time I hear him speak, I think, oh yes, for as long as there are voices like that, then there is still hope. And yeah, 80 people saying that they will vote against it. Let's see what happens. I think though, let's watch. And if in fact Boris Johnson's fabled actual 80-seat majority, if 80 rebel MPs undo that, if the vote then goes through because of Labour voting with the government, then that will say something very profound. And what I think it will say, which I think I've already said, but which I think is an important thought, is that if Labour votes with the Conservative government to put these increased restrictions through, to tighten the knot around the throat of the British people, then for me that just underlines the fact that the Labour Party or the opposition, be it Labour or anything else, is not worthy of the name. It will say that they are nothing of substance, because I think there's something frightening, significant, important that has to be noticed, that we are not being led. This is not leadership that we are seeing, it's followship. It's not leadership, it's followship. And we have to pay attention to that. The Conservatives are watching what they think the assumed majority of the population of the people want, and they are acting in that regard. Similarly, the Labour Party, the opposition, they are doing the same thing. And so they are just watching. This is political expediency. They are just trying to do what they think will garner them support for their, for their political existence. Political expediency in place of doing that which is right, that which is moral, is indefensible in a time of great need. And what we are in here, the situation in which we find ourselves, is a time of great need. And what I suspect we are going to see is that neither the Conservative government nor the Labour Party in opposition are going to do what the country needs. It's all very well saying that there might be a small cohort within the Conservative Party that are going to do what needs to be done, but what it shows up is that we are not being led. We are devoid of leadership. There is nothing of substance at the heart of the British establishment. And it's going to take something else. It's going to take the people. Because I've said it on my show, I've heard you say similar, we are the many. And at the moment, we are being misled by the few. And the time has absolutely come when the many have to make plain to the few that what is being done is wrong, immoral, unethical, and we want it set right.
Beautiful, stirring words as ever, Neil Oliver. Thank you so much for them. I hope, Neil, that every single Tory MP is listening tonight, and that we see more than 80 do the right thing tomorrow. Because believe me, more than 80 know that the government is currently doing the wrong thing. So let's hope they listen to Neil Oliver and follow their morals.
Dan, everyone, every living thing knows right from wrong. And the time is now upon us for those who know what's right to do what's right.
Yeah, perfectly put. Neil Oliver, thank you so much. It's 10 p.m. Thank you for staying with us. Coming up, the mainstream media, especially the BBC, think they smell the end of Boris Johnson. But remember, he's just 2 years from a stomping, history-making majority and delivering Brexit. So how can his premiership be saved? Tory party grandee David Mellor lays out a 4-point plan for the PM at 10:20. Is there anything that can be done to stop vaccine passports and work-from-home measures decimating businesses? Entrepreneur and former chairman of Pizza Express, Luke Johnson, speaks out in Uncancelled. Do travel bans risk stoking international tensions? And why is J.K. Rowling going head-to-head with the SNP and Police Scotland over the shocking new trans row? My panel will be unleashed on those stories and more of the day's top headlines in the media buzz. Plus, we're going to bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages imminently and throughout the hour. And we're going to crown another Greatest Britain and Union Jackass too. First, though, all the news headlines at 10 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of coronavirus in the UK. Earlier today, the government announced that 10 people in England had been hospitalised with the new strain.
Sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalisations, and sadly at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
Boris Johnson. Well, earlier on tonight, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer issued a statement to the nation and urged everyone eligible to get their booster jab.
If you haven't had your first or second jab, now is the time to come forward. it matters more than ever. Getting jabbed, wearing masks, and working from home if we can really will help prevent infections.
Well, the Health Secretary says the new Omicron variant now makes up 20% of COVID cases in England. Taking urgent questions in the Commons, Sajid Javid also warned 44% of cases in London are now the new variant. He also told MPs the UK Health Security Agency estimates the current daily number of infections at around 200,000 people. And there are now over 4,700 confirmed cases of Omicron in the UK. And people who fake COVID passes to get into public venues in England could be fined up to £10,000. From Wednesday, it'll be an offence to make or supply false evidence of COVID status. Venues, including nightclubs, theatres and sporting events, must ensure visitors are fully vaccinated or can show a negative coronavirus test result. Businesses which fail to comply risk being shut down. Away from COVID, a US citizen charged with causing Harry Dunn's death by dangerous driving will face a UK court early next year. Anne Sakoulas, wife of the US diplomat Jonathan Sakoulas, is accused of killing the teenager in a road crash outside a US military base at RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire in August 2 years ago. The Crown Prosecution Service saying the case will be heard at Westminster Magistrates Court in January. You're up to date. Now back to Dan Wootton.
And it's time now for tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. First look at the front pages, hot off the press, and the Eye leads with Britain's race to get boosted. Today, reports emerged of 5-hour waits for booster jabs as the UK answers the PM's call to get the third jab by next year. Despite the NHS offering jabs around the clock, the Health Service has warned that it cannot meet the 31st of December target. The Independent's front page headline, UK races to fight Omicron. Some 110,000 booster appointments were booked by 9 a.m. today. Online orders for home lateral flow tests were also suspended among a surge in demand. Sign up to Omi Army, say the Metro. Boris Johnson has pleaded for an army of tens of thousands of volunteers to deliver the record-breaking COVID booster rollout he promised, despite it getting off to a shambolic start today. The plea follows the NHS booking site having crashed this morning with just 110,000 appointments registered. My superstar panel back with me now, State of Fair author Laura Dodsworth, senior reporter at the I newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. Now, you'll remember that after the UK government imposed its travel industry destroying and cruel red list measures on several African countries last month, many were quick to condemn the move as an overreaction to the Omicron variant, with the South African president directly calling it out.
The northern countries impose a ban to punish the excellence that comes from Africa. They basically say, we will not allow you to travel around. But lo and behold, Omicron is spreading all over the world, including in their own countries. And now you ask yourself, where is science?
And he was right. Since first being detected in South Africa, Omicron has been found in at least 57 other countries, at least. Only today, the Health Secretary announced that the red list bans could be removed as soon as this week if Omicron was found to be the dominant strain. And with it currently making up 20% of cases, I think it proves these measures were futile. Time and again, actually, scientific evidence shows border closures do not halt the spread of variants. But in a move of retaliation, a leaked recording from Nigeria's aviation minister, Hadi Shrika, is set to announce plans to place the UK and 3 other countries onto their own red list. Shrika said, "We have given our input as aviation that it is not acceptable by us, and we recommend that those countries, Canada, UK, Saudi Arabia and Argentina, be also put on red list, just like they did similarly to us." And Esther Kraku, I think Nigeria has a really fair point here, because actually South Africa was spot on because they were doing all of the science to actually work out that there's a new variant. We've seen all of the studies prove that even the most draconian border restrictions only keep it out temporarily at best.
Yeah.
So what we're actually doing is really destroying our relationship with countries, destroying folk who need to get back to these countries for really serious personal issues. And it stinks to me of more COVID theatre.
But that's exactly what it is. It's just COVID theatre. I mean, I know people that were supposed to go to Nigeria for Christmas that have not been able to go. There's a huge Nigerian diaspora in the UK that haven't been able to return home because some people don't have money to spend on hotels for 10 days.
Of course,
when they have to be tested to go, they have to be tested when, to come, and they have to be tested when they're here already as well, which is what every other country has to do. So all these countries on the red list, there's really no point. But I think for me, the bigger argument here is actually the week before they put Nigeria on the red list, it had the lowest ever recorded COVID cases.
Really?
If you're willing to trust the word of the CCP regarding their COVID figures, when this is where the pandemic actually started and this is where this plague came from, then where is the sense in putting all these other countries on the red list when it really doesn't do anything? You're not willing to ban people coming from the epicenter of this plague, but you are willing to do that for countries that have actually recorded their lowest cases of even a mild variant like Omicron.
Well, I don't trust a word that the CCP says. Benjamin, I take this all very personally because I have now been locked out of the country that I was born, New Zealand. I'm a dual citizen. I have a British passport. I have a New Zealand passport, but I've been locked out of the country where I was born, New Zealand, where my mother is, where my father is, where my sister is, for close to 2 years. And it hasn't done any good for any country in the world to turn themselves into a hermit nation. I think it's selfish. And I think we need to stop these border bans.
But, well, I don't think we should stop the border bans. And I think in New Zealand's case, that's somewhat different to some of these short-term travel bans that are introduced between countries like South Africa and the UK. And dare I say, I might even agree with you that New Zealand is storing up a problem down the line. But in the case of what we did to southern African countries with the Omicron variant, it was clear in South Africa specifically that this was spreading rapidly. And even though it's going to get in eventually, it was wise when we didn't know what to do to pause, to stop it getting in too quickly while we understood the dangers. You know, if only we'd done this earlier, i.e. 2 years ago this month, roughly, we might never have had the whole world shut down if we'd closed the borders to China.
But Laura Dodsworth, that's just a ridiculous argument, isn't it, that people make time and again. Ken Livingstone earlier, if we'd just locked down a week earlier, we would never have had a pandemic. Absolute rubbish. Why did Australia have a pandemic? Why did New Zealand have a pandemic? It's just a delay tactic.
I completely agree with you, but I'd like to bring in another viewpoint here.
Okay.
People who follow me might be surprised by what I'm going to say, but there's something that smells a bit racist about this, I'll be honest. There was absolutely no hesitation to stigmatise and penalise African countries. And this isn't the first time. In October, when the travel restrictions were relaxed, African countries and Latin American countries stayed on the red list. In fact, at the time, the Latin American chief executive of the Travel Association said it's almost a British colonial mentality. There's a spoken word poet who's created a poem called Blacklist, which has had 3.5 million views. I'm probably going to say her name wrong. It's Adeseo Talassi, and I think she's got a really good point.
So, Benjamin, you're actually just being racist here, Laura Dodsworth says.
No, I mean, actually, Laura does certainly have a point with that argument.
Well, you're the one that wants to shut down all of the borders.
No, I agree in principle with shutting the borders to countries where a new variant comes out. Where you definitely have a point is that in some of the 8 countries in southern Africa that were banned, some of them had never had a case. And so I think it's valid to say, was that based on racism, on judgments about those countries? In the reverse, I thought we were very slow to put on the red list India when its dangerous variant emerged. And we did that because Boris Johnson was due to visit there and trying to rustle up some trade and get some money. And so, you know, that was also the wrong.
Wish people
but what about China?
Realise, Esther, that these variants just spread.
But why is no one talking about
We
China?
can't keep them out.
Why is no one talking about putting China on the red list? They were so happy. Yeah, you know, the thing is,
Well, China's essentially shut itself off to the world, ironically, hasn't it?
True, but you do make a good point about racism, but there's also economic and financial incentives here. They wouldn't put China on the red list because they know that the economic...
Yeah, and do you know why I think
it's
particularly counterproductive, this whole shutting the borders thing? Because if I were a country in Africa now, I would say, sod this tracking of the variants. Why on earth am I going to open up to the world and do all of this genome sequencing if we know that the moment we discover something new, all of these Western countries are going to decimate our economy by shutting the borders? So I think the whole thing is completely counterproductive. And I think the borders need to remain open. Now, you probably remember back in October, my little rants about the tragically terrible Diana the Musical, which only last month opened on Broadway, but was on offer for the whole world to see via Netflix.
Flashbulbs fill the air. Frenzy fills the night. A lonely girl aswirl, lost in blinding light. Hello, I'm Diana.
Do you know what, guys? I promise you, this has to be the worst musical I've ever seen. And that is saying something. At the time, I actually described it as the most offensive and degrading portrayal of the late Princess of Wales in fiction since her death. Honestly, it's worse than Cats. I mean the movie Cats.
Yeah.
Because obviously I love the musical.
Yeah, no.
This is worse than Cats, the musical. Well, it's been announced that the play is closing. After just 33 shows and 4 weeks, the curtain thankfully comes down for good on Friday. Thankfully, no one will have to endure moments like this ever again.
And then there's Charles, who's happy when he hears music by dead white men. Perhaps his girl could turn him into a rocker. This is how your people, this is how your people dance. Young and free, everything you wanna be. This is how your people, this is how your people.
It's comedy, at least. It's comedy. But while one atrocious depiction of Diana's life comes to an end, another has raised its toxic little head again. As today, Kristen Stewart got Spencer's lone nomination for a Golden Globe in the Best Actress in a Drama category, where she will face off with the likes of British hopeful Olivia Colman for her role in The Lost Daughter and Lady Gaga for The House of Gucci. Do you know, everyone was telling me that that House of Gucci was terrible. Well, I loved it. I recommend it. I thought Gaga was great too. Kenneth Branagh's Belfast and Western The Power of the Dog, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, were the most nominated films with 7 nods each. On the TV side, business drama Succession received the most for a TV show with 5. Do you know what? I don't know if any of you watch Succession, but it's been absolutely rubbish, this series. Anyway, Laura Dodsworth, Benjamin Butterworth, Esther Krakow, do stand by, because up next, does Boris need to pick a successor to prevent Tory rivals knifing him in the back? One of the party's greats, David Malla, has come up with a 4-point plan that will help the PM keep hold of power in this turbulent time. He'll reveal all after the break. Plus, why is J.K. Rowling going to war with the SNP and Police Scotland over potential plans for rapists who identify as women? My panel will get into that story in the Media Buzz at 10:30, where we'll also bring you more of tomorrow's front pages.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. A bit of a three-way split with the weather tomorrow. Most places going to be dry and bright, but there will be some wet and windy weather in the northwest, and the south at times likely to be a bit dull and dank. This wiggling, waving weather front's been bringing quite a wet day across parts of northwest England and Wales. It is slowly slipping southwards, so outbreaks of rain trickling into the Midlands and South Wales overnight and lasting most of the night here. Clearer skies for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and eastern Scotland, but then things turn wet and windy once more in the far northwest. Well, we have the clearing skies. Temperatures, certainly rural areas, could drop down close to freezing, but we're a long way from that in the south. A very mild night here, but it will be quite a dank, drizzly, misty morning across much of the south, the Midlands and parts of South Wales. Rain on and off here. That should tend to fizzle out, so most places becoming dry. But a brighter day for northwest England compared to today in southern Scotland, Northern Ireland too. But there will be drizzly rain across western Scotland and very wet and windy across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Quite mild here and again pretty mild across the south. during the evening. We'll start to see that rain pepping up and pushing south across the Highlands down towards the central belt, and some rain heading into Northern Ireland. So again, further south, most places dry, but it could again turn quite misty and murky, with maybe the odd light shower across the south on Wednesday. Certainly rain at times for northwest England, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a brighter day in the far north, the winds easing down, and we should see some sunny spells too for parts of the North Midlands and eastern England on Wednesday. Again, pretty mild, double digits for the majority. Now, it's going to stay largely dry beyond Wednesday, Thursday and into the weekend. Not much rain around at all, but often it will be fairly cloudy, and with light winds, an increasing chance of seeing some thick fog patches too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Look, if you've picked up a newspaper recently, you'll know why it's been a tough week for Boris Johnson. And now the vultures, the political vultures, are starting to circle with reports that multiple senior Conservatives, including Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Priti Patel, and even, wait for it, Matt Hancock, have their eye on the top job. But what does Boris have to do to rescue his premiership? Tory grandee and a former health secretary, David Mellor, has set out a brilliant and, by his own admission, ruthless 4-point plan for the PM that will allow him to keep hold of power. And I'm joined by the former cabinet minister now. David, it's great to have you here. I want to talk about the whole thing in just a moment. But first, this 4-point plan, I want to run you through each of your points and get you to explain. The first might seem obvious, David, but you say Boris needs to start telling the truth.
Well, I don't think it's good if he appears to be a serial liar. And I think that Boris needs to square with the British people. I mean, Boris has got one of Boris' most remarkable gifts is people like him, or they have done in the past.
Yeah.
They think he's got charisma. He reaches out. He reaches parts that other politicians don't reach, in the sense that he is. He seems to be a normal member of the human race, and that allowed him, for instance, in his 2 terms as mayor of London, to be able to get to what was basically, and has been for some time now, London, a Labour city, and to get elected twice. But that has to depend on squaring up to people and giving them the truth. And I think with Boris, there is a suggestion somehow that he is quite happy to say the first thing that comes into his head if he thinks it's plausible, and he's not so bothered about whether it's truthful. So I think if he loses his reputation for truth, then it will fall apart for him. And that's what happened, for instance. My memory of politics goes back more than half a century. Harold Wilson, who, was had an even bigger election victory in 1966 than Boris ever did. But the public soon became very disillusioned with Harold Wilson. And, the old joke was, how do you know when Harold Wilson is lying? And the answer was his lips move.
Yeah.
And
I don't think we're quite there with Boris, but you're right. If that becomes the overwhelming view, that's an issue. You also say he needs to change the lightweight people around him. And this is something a lot of senior Tories, we had Michael Patillo on the show on Thursday, are saying, Boris, you've got to hire some heavyweights.
Well, I think the problem, look, once again, to draw a practical example, I many years ago knew Ronald Reagan quite well. Ronald Reagan goes down as a great American president.
Absolutely.
Because he was Uncle Sam. He was someone that it was very difficult to dislike. And he played to the strengths of the American system, which a lot of presidents couldn't do, because the president is the head of state. He's not just a political leader. But Ronald Reagan was able to do that because he had behind him people of weight and substance. So the broad brush that Ronald Reagan brought to politics was supplemented and augmented by a lot of detailed work done by heavyweights behind him. Problem for Boris is that he doesn't have heavyweights around him in number 10. I mean, that nonsense, Allegra Stratton, putting onto a film that anyone could then dig out to embarrass her, humiliate her, actually, and embarrass the government, about joking about not telling the truth about having these parties. That is childish. That is student politics. It's not real politics. And then you get the problem even worse with members of the cabinet. I mean, one of the things I quoted in my piece was Willie Whitelaw. I was a protege of Willie Whitelaw's. Willie Whitelaw was Margaret Thatcher's deputy, and he used to stand up to her and tell her what she needed to know. And she once famously said, "Everyone needs a Willie." Well, Willie Whitelaw was, her Willie. But when you look at who he's got, who Boris has got, his deputy is Dominic Raab. Well, does everyone need a Raab? Does anyone need a Raab? I mean, we're talking about different levels of people. Yeah. Boris cannot be a lightweight if he doesn't have heavyweights behind him.
Yeah, indeed. And you also say that the other two things he has to do is actually allow folk, his stars, you might say, like Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, to take more of the spotlight, and also not be scared to anoint a successor. Explain why you think that's important.
Well, I don't know that he needs to anoint a successor as such, but I think that he seems to think that as long as there's no obvious successor, he is safe. But of course, once again, in my piece, again, digging back into history, another notorious Old Etonian Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, was brought down by a fellow Old Etonian who quoted an ancient poem, which ended up with the immortal words, "Never glad, confident morning again." It was called The Lost Leader. And that devastated Macmillan. And it was one of the great moments in parliamentary history. The House of Commons was transformed by this, transfixed by it, because the question we all have to ask, Macmillan had to ask the question, could it ever be glad, confident morning again for him? And it couldn't. And with Boris, can it be glad, confident morning again for him? He mustn't depend on the fact there wasn't an obvious successor to him, because Harold Macmillan, there was no obvious successor to Harold Macmillan, and they had to go and dig into the House of Lords to take out Alec Hume, Lord Hume, and he had to become a commoner, go into the House of Commons as a by-election. This is all stuff that isn't really, it was no protection. So he needs to have around him strong people. A leader need never be afraid of strong support. It's a weak leader who is afraid of strong support.
And finally, Dave, do you believe that Boris Johnson can remain leader and win the next election?
Well, I don't think you can write Boris off, because he's a charismatic guy. And, to go back to old jokes, forgive me, a moment to recycle old jokes, but for a lot of politicians today, they think charisma is December the 25th, don't they? But Boris Johnson is a charismatic politician. But what he cannot appear to be is a dishonest, deceitful politician. He has also to have strong principles, things he believes in. And I think one of Boris's weaknesses that I don't think he's really a conservative. That's his problem. A conservative does not believe in high taxation. Boris has now taken the percentage of the national wealth that is consumed by the state to the highest level for 70 years. That's not what a conservative politician does. And that's why I think he needs to bring forward people who are conservative. I think Rishi Sunak is a conservative. I also think, although there are plenty of people who think she herself is a bit of a lightweight, but Liz Truss is a proper conservative. She believes in Thatcherite principles. And Boris needs to bring forward people who are on his team who are conservatives, because this is not an English nationalist government. This is a conservative government, and there are conservative principles which the public need to attach themselves to. I mean, the job of a politician is to whistle a tune that the public can hum. High spending, high taxes, Labour, bad. Low spending, low taxes, Tory, good. Those are the messages.
Fascinating analysis from Tory party grandee, the former Health Secretary, David Mallow. Pleasure to have you, David. We'll speak again soon. Coming up, is there anything that can be done to stop vaccine passports and work-from-home measures decimating business? Entrepreneur and director of Gales and Brompton Bicycles, Luke Johnson, stands up for terrified bosses and workers everywhere in Uncancelled. But next is allowing rape perpetrators to self-identify as female, one of the most dangerous examples of political correctness yet. And was J.K. Rowling right to get involved in that debate? I'll put that to my superstar panel, plus we'll cast a critical eye over tomorrow's front pages next.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
We're going to return now to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. More front pages have just been delivered. Let's go to them. The Daily Express leads with Boris's plea with rebels, saying, "Back my balanced measures." The Prime Minister faces his biggest revolt yet by Tory backbenchers, furious at his new COVID rules restricting freedoms. Johnson's plea comes amid reports of a wave of ministerial aides potentially quitting over his COVID passport rules. More than 1 in 5 Tories are expected to oppose or sit out the vote, leaving the PM potentially reliant on support from Labour. The Daily Telegraph's take on this story: NHS overwhelmed after millions answer call for jabs. More than 4.4 million visits were made to the NHS website after Boris warned of a tidal wave of Omicron cases. Plus, Tory whips are said to have launched a frantic 11th hour bid to curb a backbench rebellion tomorrow over vaccine passports. I'll tell you how they curb it. Just drop the vaccine passports. There's no evidence for them. They don't work. Britain needs you'll join Xmas jabs army. That's the front of the Sun. Thousands of Brits have been urged today to sign up to the Sun's jabs army to help deliver COVID vaccination boosters in time for Christmas. Their plea comes as Boris Johnson and the Duchess of Cornwall encouraged the paper's driver for volunteers, with the Duchess hailing the Sun for giving hope of brighter days ahead. The Daily Star declares we're all rocket scientists now, Dave, whoever he is. Aerospace engineers and heart surgeons are no smarter than the rest of us, it turns out. That's according to a new survey. I believe that. Plus, Tyson Fury has been shortlisted for the BBC Sports Personality of the Year, despite threatening to sue the broadcaster if he ended up being nominated. The boxer previously said of the awards, "It means nothing to me and I don't need it or want it." Let me bring my superstar panel back now. The author, Laura Dodsworth, the iNewspapers, Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator, Esther Kraku. Now, Police Scotland has come under fire after saying it will record rapes by offenders with a penis as being committed by a woman if the perpetrator defines themselves as one. This came out after former SNP politician and Justice Secretary Kenny McCaskill asked Police Scotland how it would deal with rapes under the party's new Gender Recognition Act, which would make it easier for people to self-identify. Assistant Chief Constable Gary Ritchie confirmed a rape could be recorded as being committed by a woman in several circumstances, including if the culprit does not have a full gender recognition certificate. McCaskill described the policy as a dangerous legal absurdity, saying it's physically impossible and is about dogma overriding common sense. Meanwhile, author J.K. Rowling, who lives in Scotland and wrote the majority of the first Harry Potter in a cafe in Edinburgh, once again took a stand for women's rights, despite recent concerns for her safety after her address was leaked by trans activists, referencing George Orwell's 1984. Rowling, who in June 2020 opened up about being a survivor of sexual assault, tweeted, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. The penised individual who raped you is a woman." Benjamin Butterworth, explain how trans activists can justify this, because if you look at the legal definition of rape, Benjamin, it actually has to be committed by a man. The law says he.
You won't catch me defending a rapist of any description at any time. What I have a problem with is the idea that this should be used to stigmatise the great many normal, hard-working, tax-paying, decent trans people who are as abhorred by rape as everyone else. And actually, sadly, more often than not, more likely statistically to be victims of all sorts of domestic abuse because they're often in particularly vulnerable positions. I don't think we should judge a group based on the criminals among them.
I cannot believe I.
Well, for example, you often hear a debate about.
You agree, Esther. I've got to bring Esther.
I agree.
Well, hang on. Let me just finish my point quickly, which is that you often.
But she never agrees with you.
Often
this is quite a moment.
Oh, you agreeing with me?
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I'm shocked. But you often hear.
Give way to Esther. She says she agrees.
No,
with you.
I think you have a point, and I think yes, trans people disproportionately tend to be victims of rape, and I think this. The problem is, right, and while he has a point, we could use this legislation to actually victimise trans people just going about their business. My issue here is what happened to science and fact. Okay, just because you say you identify as a female doesn't negate the fact that in terms of the legal definition of rape, you committed the act as a male, and therefore that is effectively that.
Well, Laura Dodsworth, you
can't negate
this is
that.
an example of a post-truth world. What do you mean by that?
OK, so as you said in your introduction, it's a legal absurdity. Rape is the non-consensual penetration with a penis, OK? So only a male-bodied person, formerly known as a man, can commit rape. So it is post-truth, but worse than that, and I do not want to make this about trans rights or ordinary trans people going about their business. It's not. It's about rapists and rape victims. So if I'm going to come down on anyone's side, I'm going to come down very firmly on the side of truth, but also the rape victim. Imagine a situation where a rape victim has to describe their rapist as a woman or use female pronouns. That is cruel. It's an indignity and it's a lie.
But you know what?
Because I'd have to go through a case, Esther, where that's exactly how the judge would presumably have.
But you know, the irony is the people that implement these sorts of legal jargon and crap like this, what they often forget is they're anti-woman. Every single time they come out with this, from whether it's the Brit Awards removing, female artists and male, exactly. It's all anti-women.
Can you understand that, Benjamin? This is actually just anti-woman.
I mean, look, as Esther and I agreed, and I'm sure the statistics bear out, transgender people, of which there are very few, are tragically more likely to be victims of this than just about any other group. And so it's unfair. It's unfair to try and make a competition in that way, as though transgender women are threatening
where's your
all other women.
That trans people are more likely to be raped than any other group?
Well, I'm not referring to rape specifically, but there's lots of evidence.
We're talking about rape.
Well, for example, abuse, being a victim of domestic violence, for example, trans women are right at the top in terms of that. But it doesn't really matter because it's not a competition, and so often this is presented as though
you've just presented it like it is a competition.
No, what I presented it is to illustrate the point that so often it is claimed as though transgender women are the perpetrators of all these acts, rather than the fact that more often than not they are the victims.
Being claimed here. I think what is being claimed here is that the rights of transgender women is superseding the rights of biological women, which is a problem.
But it's not because the law should be applied exactly as it would to a person of any description that had raped.
And children can be raped. So when we're talking about rape victims, we're not only talking about women. This isn't a competition between trans women and women.
Precisely.
This is about a very important definition which would put a rape victim of any sex into a totally bizarre, post-truth and incredibly undignified position of having to describe their male-bodied rapist as a woman. And that does actually make me really angry.
They don't have to describe their rapist as anything.
I'm afraid that's not true.
They'd be perfectly entitled to not do that.
that's not true because a judge has said...
Well, you don't do that because it's never happened.
A judge has said...
It's never happened.
Are you not going to let me finish the sentence?
Go on then.
Thank you. A judge has said that they would expect people in court to refer to the perpetrator of the crime according to their preferred pronouns.
Exactly.
So it's exactly what would happen.
Look, let's lighten the mood. Madonna has never shied away from controversy, but when she posted this cheeky photo on Instagram, it's post-Watershed, so I think we're OK, she probably didn't anticipate sparking a feud with one of this era's most notable rappers. Madge accused Inda Club's 50 Cent of sexism and ageism after he reposted her raunchy snap and joked, "Lol, that's Madonna under the bed trying to do like a virgin at 63. She shot out if she don't get her old ass up." The hip-hop star also shared this meme of Madonna taking the place of the Wicked Witch from The Wizard of Oz. Now, the hip-hop star apologised, but Madonna, and you know I love her, she didn't let him off the hook, So this is what she had to say. And by the way, this is Madonna responding using some heavily filtered Instagram effects.
There are those that find it hard to appreciate people and things that are different. And they try to shame me or humiliate me. An apology is not valid if you don't know what you're apologizing for. What you should be apologizing for is your misogynistic, sexist, ageist behavior and remarks. You are trying to put a limit on when women should be able to feel good about themselves.
All I'm going to say to Fiddy is never make Madonna the butt of your jokes. Laura Dodsworth, Benjamin Butterworth, Esther Kraku, do stand by, because coming up, will Gary Neville make a Prime Minister for the ages? One of my panel thinks so, and I'll reveal who as we crown today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But next and Uncancelled, is there anything that can be done to stop vaccine passports and work from home measures decimating businesses? Entrepreneur, director of Gales Bakery, Luke Johnson, one of our top business people, speaks out. First though, quick 30-second look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as MPs vote on Plan B, GB News star Nigel Farage will give his take on the vaccine passport rebellion that's divided the nation yet again. Netflix co-founder Mark Randolph weighs in on the streaming wars, big tech, and what the new era of TV means for the likes of the BBC in an exclusive interview. Plus, we'll debate the day's top stories with my superstar panel, the author and journalist Rebecca Reed, conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where some of Britain's top voices speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, if Plan B measures such as working from home are implemented this week, it could bring the recovery of the hospitality industry to a shuddering halt. And one person who knows all too well about the impact of COVID restrictions on businesses is my next guest, one of the country's top businessmen, director, co-owner of Gales and Brompton Bicycles and chairman of Brighton Pier Group, Luke Johnson. Luke, who made his name growing Pizza Express in the 90s, has been critical of Boris Johnson's scaremongering. He wrote on Twitter on Friday, "The chaos of the testing mania and isolating doom loop means running an organisation becomes almost impossible. Remember, 10 million can't work from home or society shuts down and we starve." Luke, it's great to have you on the show. Why do you think the government seem to be constantly ignoring all of the collateral damage that Plan B will cause, especially for businesses?
I'm not sure. I fear that they're caught in a sort of safety first mania, which means that they are simply not taking into account at all the harms that lockdown and the other restrictions and the fear are causing. And I know from direct experience, you know, these are the few weeks of the year when many businesses in things like entertainment and hospitality make most of their profits for the whole annual period. And they need that cash in order to survive through the desperate months of January and February. And already I would say that the scaremongering by government, the talk last night of an emergency and a tidal wave of infections and the consequences of that, not exactly what I would call sober or very scientific language, mean that, you know, cancellations and to a degree for a great many, you know, restaurants, pubs, clubs and other venues, Christmas is already dead.
Yeah.
And the harm is being done. And this for a new variant where we really don't know whether it's actually quite mild.
Well, all of the signs are good. I mean, you speak to the scientists in South Africa and they think we're going mad. Plan B obviously includes the introduction of vaccine passports. It's going to be nodded through even despite this big Tory rebellion, likely because of Labour. Do you worry, like I do, Luke, that this is some sort of creep? Because I don't think vaccine passports are just going to remain for large events. You can see in January, when cases rise, as they are inevitably going to, you're going to have to show a vaccine passport to buy a Big Mac or to order a pint in the pub. And that would be catastrophic for the hospitality industry.
Well, and also I think it is a very profound intrusion on people's freedom.
Well, indeed.
That, you know, they disclose their personal medical procedures. And the truth is, will vaccine passports even be effective in terms of trying to achieve what they're attempting to, which is to coerce or blackmail people into taking vaccines? I'm very pro-vaccines, and I think we should make every effort to persuade people to take the vaccines. But the fact of the matter is, like so many of the restrictions, the lockdowns and all the rest, the proof of their efficacy is nowhere to be seen.
No.
And we look at places like Sweden, and we realise that all this misery, all the collateral damage, all the people suffering from things like cancer who are being neglected, treated as second-class citizens because we have a monomania about a single disease. We've turned the NHS into the national COVID service because the country has become completely obsessed about a single illness, which right now is killing well under 10% of all those people who die. What about the other 90% who are dying? Don't we care about them and all the other harms that it's doing to the rest of the society, from mass anxiety to destroying children's education? And it feels to me as if the government has lost the plot.
And Luke, why do you think there hasn't been that many major voices from business to cut through over the course of these business-destroying lockdowns? You've been one of the few.
I think the government has thrown hundreds of billions at business to keep it quiet, to keep it on the road, and to a degree, I agree with that, because I think if they hadn't have had furlough, we would have had 10% unemployment. So I think, in a sense, that was a good thing. But I also think it's been a bribe. And I also think there's industrial quantities of virtue signalling going on by an awful lot of people who feel that they don't want to step out of line, they don't want to be contrarian, and they think that arguing against the narrative is going to damage their reputations.
And what about the media, Luke? I mean, you have some experience. You were the former chairman of Channel 4, of course. Why has the media been so compliant when it comes to pushing the lockdown narrative?
Well, I think fear sells, and I think, if it bleeds, it leads. And I think I'm afraid to say that a lot of the media have sold bad news because I think it gets clicks and views. And I also think, actually, the rules introduced last year that forced, from Ofcom, that forced the broadcasters in particular to not transmit anything that would necessarily disagree with the government's narrative, because, of the implication it's a national emergency, means that I think particularly the major news broadcasters have been very timid about suggesting that, for example, the lockdowns cause huge collateral damage, which has not been properly measured and not set against, in a proper cost-benefit analysis, set against the possible advantages of these restrictions, which I would argue, again, are unproven.
Luke Johnson, you have provided sage analysis throughout this pandemic. So good to have you on the show. And I really recommend everyone finds Luke on Twitter, because it just will make you feel a little bit more calm as we go through what is going to be a rocky few weeks. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. My superstar panel, back with me for this, the author, Laura Dodsworth, senior reporter at the newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator, Esther Kraku. Esther, let's kick off with you. Who is your greatest Britain nominee?
My greatest Britain is Gary Neville.
Oh, so you're the one who thinks he could be Prime Minister?
His Twitter feed is fantastic. Finally, there's someone... I don't think anyone in the sports world has actually criticised the government on their COVID measures at all. This is so refreshing, and he gets my praise just for that. I think finally there are people with sense in these higher echelons of society that actually are seeing the lunacy that's going on with our government.
Well, he's a major lefty, but OK, Benjamin Butterworth will be happy with him as Prime Minister. Benjamin, who's your greatest Britain nominee?
Well, mine is the Labour MP Margaret Hodge, and it's because last week an investigation into the Grindr serial killer who killed 4 men found that 9 police officers had made serious failings that might have meant that more gay men were killed. The Metropolitan Police did nothing, no disciplines to any of the 9, and promoted 5 of those police officers. And Margaret Hodge stood up in Parliament today and said that's not good enough, and the Met Police needs to be seriously investigated about how on earth it thinks that 4 innocent boys could be killed and nobody be disciplined when there was so many failings in that investigation.
Yeah, what a shocking case. Very good to draw attention to that. Laura Dodsworth, your nominee.
My nominee is Conservative rebel ringleader Steve Baker, who's been leading the fight against unevidenced and illiberal vaccine passports. Some might call it political suicide, but actually it's just the kind of integrity and courage we need in the Cabinet, maybe even a future PM. He also set up Conservative Way Forward, which, is quite a new movement, and the idea is to promote freedom under law and conservative principles. And I think we really need political transformation, both from new parties and from within.
Well, look, you've convinced me, Laura. You're the winner. Steve Baker, he's clearly today's greatest Briton because he is leading the charge, and 80 Tory MPs could rebel. I want more. I want 90. I want 100. Do the right thing tomorrow in Parliament, Tory MPs. Jackass time now. Esther Kraku, your nomination?
So all the Downing Street partygoers are my union jackasses, because I don't understand why Allegra Stratton was the only one that took the fall for that. Clearly it wasn't a party of one.
She got caught. She got caught. That's the issue.
But this is the thing, right?
She wasn't even there.
She got caught partying with whom?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Why have we not heard more about the people that were at this party? And the media seems to think that we've forgotten, but I haven't.
Benjamin Butterworth, your nomination?
Mine is Maggie Throup. Never heard of her? No. She's the vaccines minister who doesn't do any interviews, who doesn't so much as post about how you can get your boosters on social media. And last Thursday, she went on Question Time and gave the most pathetic excuse for the Christmas party. She said it didn't happen. Then she said, but if it did happen, there were no rules broken. She's a joke.
Laura Dodsworth, your nomination.
My nomination is Boris Johnson for arrogantly interrupting the British public last night to present an alarmist version of an emergency which is not yet an emergency, for riding roughshod over informed consent, and for ruling by diktat, therefore disrespecting Parliament and the electorate.
Well, look, interesting nominations. I'm actually going to go with Benjamin Butterworth on this one. I think today's union jackass is Maggie Throup. She had a great opportunity, this unknown Maggie, to actually prove that she was a cabinet star of the future by taking hold of the vaccine booster programme weeks and weeks and weeks ago. Of course, it's made Nadhim Zahawi one of the rising stars of the Conservative Party. And Maggie has been MIA. I don't think you can criticise her for being off social media, but there's lots of ways she needs to get her message across. And at the end of the day, we wouldn't be in this situation where we were now having to tell people not to go to the GP, force the cancellation of operations if Maggie had done her job better. But thank you so much to a fantastic superstar panel this Monday. Laura Dodsworth, Benjamin Butterworth and Esther Kraku. I'll be back again tomorrow from 9 p.m. But now it's time for Headliners. Good night.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. A bit of a three-way split with the weather tomorrow. Most places going to be dry and bright, but there will be some wet and windy weather in the northwest, and the south at times likely to be